easily one of my most anticipated shows of not only 2023 but for the last several years has finally wrapped up after 9 episodes, and that is The Last of Us on HBO. Now, I preface this by saying there will be obviously spoilers, so if you haven't watched the entire season, make sure you do before you watch this video, unless you don't mind spoilers. Now, as you know, I'm a big fan of The Last of Us, especially the first game. I've talked about it ad nauseum. So when they announced that there was going to be The Last of Us television show, I was not only excited but also apprehensive, because the source material definitely gives way to the idea of having a television show. It's definitely made for a televised product, more so than, say, a movie product. But also is the fact that having the emotional connection, having the knowledge of not only what happens in the game, but also how rooted the gameplay is in terms of the narrative progression. My question was how well they will be able to translate some of those aspects into a televised event. And for better or worse, they did a very good job, though there were some noticeable flaws, specifically from the perspective of someone that has played the game. But on a positive note, I want to start off by saying the casting was exceptional. I know it's been said time and time again, but Pedro Pascal is one of the best actors of our generation. He embodied Joel so well, not only from the perspective of repeating some of the lines that we've heard in the game, but him also adding some of his natural aura and charisma to the character that made this Joel not only feel unique in terms of his presentation, but also made him feel very connected to the original premise of the character. Bella Ramsey as Ellie definitely embodied that character as well. There were actually several moments where her voice sounded just like Ellie in the original game. Like, they really did a masterful job of embracing the characters and how to portray them on a televised product compared to their video game counterparts. Meryl Dandridge as Marlene was fantastic for the short time that we had her on the show. Same thing with Nico Parker as Sarah. Now, of course, they took some liberties with some of the ethnicities and the presentation of the characters, but I was fine with it. I think everyone fit their role very well, even if they weren't one-to-one in terms of what they were originally in the video game. Unfortunately, just like the game, we don't get that much of Tess, but the time that we do have, especially when they did a little bit extra in terms of giving some backstory and some exposition to her character and her relationship with Joel, was done masterfully well, and I enjoyed it. On the opposite end, we didn't get as much with Tommy as I would have hoped. When we get to the 6th episode and Tommy and Joel are reunited at Tommy's Dam, I was hoping for a lot more in terms of not only their... Unfortunately, we don't get as much with Tommy as I would have hoped, especially their interactions with Joel and Tommy specifically. There were definitely some missed opportunities when it came to Tommy's character, and I know, of course, with Season 2 coming up and them emphasizing the fact that this will be Part 2 in terms of the video game narrative, we'll get more Tommy in Season 2 than we did in the original, but I think that there was a lot that could have been done in terms of character interactions between Tommy and Joel, especially during that moment. And if they had gone forward and had the Raider invasion happen at Tommy's Dam, it would have really emphasized the unity between the two brothers, showcased the abilities of Ellie in the battlefield, and then also have this big reunion between Ellie and Joel at the ranch. But of course, we didn't get all of that. Actually, we didn't get a lot of certain interactions, and one of the most important interactions early on in the game that emphasized just how abrasive Ellie was when she first started her journey alongside Joel was her interactions with Bill at Bill's Town. The 3rd episode featuring Bill and Frank was one of the most emotional episodes of the entire season. I thought it was well done, but it was unfortunate because I thought it was going to lead to Bill and Joel and Ellie having their interaction. We would see the backstory between Bill and Frank, and then it would lead into Bill and Joel and Ellie interacting, with Bill becoming obviously more reclusive and hateful because he did not want to interact with people anymore because of the loss of his husband Frank. But unfortunately, Bill commits suicide alongside the death of his husband, so we never get that interaction between Ellie and Bill and Joel. While it's not necessarily detrimental to the story, it was one of my favorite interactions early in the story because it showcased the different personalities that were occurring outside of society as we knew it in the early portion of the game when we were just stuck in these little encampments. On the opposite end, I was very interested and actually thought they did a very good job. Changed the Samus' character as he is now deaf in this version instead of the original game where he's just a normal kind of quirky kid. While there was a childlike interaction and just a feeling of youth and purity when it came to Sam and Ellie's relationship in the game, to me it was even more flourished in this version. The seventh episode did a good job of utilizing the source material and modifying it a little bit to really emphasize the relationships that Ellie had with certain people that didn't unfortunately live to experience the rest of her journey. And of course, the Left Behind episode of episode 7 with her and Riley was, in the video game, a DLC pack that lasted about 2 hours. So, of course, we don't get the full-fledged enjoyment of their interactions inside the mall, but some of the high points of that DLC is shown here. Unfortunately, one of the things that is connected to the idea of what's going on during the Left Behind DLC and what's really happening actively in real time in terms of Ellie during that time of saving Joel from death was the fact that we don't have the big mall scramble of Ellie trying to find the medicine while we're also getting flashback scenes of the Left Behind DLC. So I'm not necessarily upset about that. I would have liked to seen Ellie in more of a battlefield situation to see how she had grown, similar to what we saw in the video game that we didn't necessarily see here. And honestly, that's one of the biggest problems I have with the TV show, is the fact that we do not have some of those significant moments that really emphasize Ellie's changing and becoming a better warrior. One of the most prominent scenes in the video game is when she saves Joel from being drowned by a raider, and she shoots the guy for the first time and kills him. And it really changes her, it really rocks her. Even though she's full of adrenaline and feels like she's done something really remarkable, it becomes obvious that it's a piece of her innocence that is completely gone now, it's wiped away. And we didn't really get that in the TV show. The same thing as I mentioned earlier, the ranch scene. It was kind of passed by with their interaction and then Ellie choosing to go on with Joel by jumping on the horse. There was a big moment in the ranch scene that was kind of compressed in the 7th episode that we could have gotten here, that would have really saw them battle their way out of a terrible situation and really figure out that they need each other more than they realize. And they want to be around each other, which really tied into the university section of the video game, where they have more of a bond and a kinship. The way they're talking to each other as they're moving through the university is more relaxed and more easygoing. It feels like a father-daughter relationship. And as you see through the game, it really evolves into that. Whereas with the television show, it feels like it goes from Joel being really hard to Ellie, to sort of softening up, to all of a sudden now they're at that moment where they feel like a father-daughter relationship. The ebbs and flows doesn't work as well on the TV show as it did in the game because of those moments being cut out. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I've seen a lot of people complain about the season finale. And in reality, this was probably the closest one-to-one example of the television show following what the game set forth. Beyond the preceding featuring Ellie's mother and her giving birth to Ellie, and sort of an explanation as to why Ellie may be immune to the infection, which may play a major role in Season 2 or it may not. But a majority of the final episode, the season finale, Look for the Light, was very much taken from the final hour or so of the video game. A lot of the dialogue, a lot of the interactions, and most importantly, Joel slaughtering dozens of fireflies as he made his way to the room to save Ellie from being lobotomized and eventually killed. And I think one of the main reasons people aren't necessarily into this that much, beyond the fact that Joel having this invincibility armor out of nowhere to slaughter all of these people, is the fact that you're not playing the video game. I think one of the main reasons why that moment is so harrowing is because playing the game, you feel like Joel. You feel like you're going through this onslaught to get to your goal of saving the girl that you've adopted as your daughter. It doesn't feel as profound and harrowing and downright deadly and scary watching Joel do it instead of playing it. Because for me, it felt like I was watching a live action depiction of what I played in the game, while still having the memories and feeling of playing the game itself and just kind of seeing it play out in live action as Pedro Pascal does what I did as Joel in the game. But the biggest flaw for me is definitely the lack of infected. We had a couple of episodes where they were prominent. The second episode where they were going through the museum area, and we get the clickers, and we see just how dangerous and scary the clickers can be. And then the 5th episode, where the infected come in mass, topped off by a bloater, who in the 4th episode was kind of alluded to. And when he arrives, it is incredible. It's one of the best scenes of the entire series thus far, when the bloater just goes on a rampage. But unfortunately, that's it. We don't have many moments of the terror that comes with walking around an isolated area with no lights besides your flashlight, trying to stay as quiet as possible, to not only avoid clickers, but regular infected, to fight off a bloater, or, as I noted when it came to Tommy's Dam, not having the ability to fight off raiders. We don't have a lot of action. It's presented more as a character piece, and the relationship is the focus between Joel and Ellie. But I think that could have been bonded a lot more with the presentation of the action that we saw in the game. A great example of that is the Pittsburgh section in the game that is now the Kansas City section in the television show, where they're ambushed. And you see them working together to try to survive while also stopping raiders from killing them, which we find out later on is actually connected to the underground school system that was happening under the city. Having more of that action, I think, would have really showcased the bond growing just like it did in the game between Ellie and Joel. Overall, as a fan of the franchise, as a fan of the video game, I really did enjoy The Last of Us. I really wish we could have gotten more episodes. I think 12 episodes would have been the sweet spot because we could have gotten more of some of those situations that we got in the game now in live action that would have helped emphasize the relationship between Joel and Ellie and could have gotten some fan service for people that had played the game. I'm very intrigued to see where they go with Season 2. I've talked about it on this channel, some of the flaws I felt that came with The Last of Us Part 2. And considering the adulation and the response for Pedro Pascal's depiction of Joel, it's hard for me to believe they'll go one-to-one with the presentation of Joel and how he ultimately reaches his demise in The Last of Us Part 2. I'm intrigued to see how they try to retcon or change up or don't change some of the flaws that comes with the story of The Last of Us Part 2 as well for Season 2 and maybe even Season 3 of The Last of Us.